It was a time of quiet in the world of humans. Peace had lasted for decades, with only small skirmishes and tensions here and there. But everything was about to change. A small group of soldiers, deep in the ice-covered mountains, had uncovered something that would alter the fate of humanity forever. The mission had been simple. Find anything unusual in the region and report back. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. It was an ancient frozen temple, hidden beneath the ice for countless millennia. At first, they thought it was just a relic of a long-lost civilization. But as they ventured deeper, something else became clear. This wasn't just an abandoned structure. It was a tomb. The soldiers, a mix of young recruits and experienced officers, stood before the massive icy doors of the temple. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Strange carvings covered the walls, and the air felt thick with an energy they couldn't explain. But what caught their attention was the shape in the center of the chamber, that it was a statue, or at least it looked like one. A tall, imposing figure of a woman, her body covered in silver and black armor. Her face, fierce and proud, was carved with such detail that it seemed almost alive. But the most striking part was her hair, fiery orange, almost glowing, as though it had been touched by the flames of a long-forgotten fire. They stood there in awe, unsure whether to move closer or turn back. But the leader of the group, Captain Aaron Walker, couldn't resist. Something about the statue, or what it represented, called to him. As he stepped closer, he noticed something that made his heart race. Faint markings along the woman's arm. The symbols matched something they had seen in old legends. Ancient texts describing a long-lost warrior race, Vulpine warriors, known for their strength and intelligence, said to have been defeated in an ancient war. But how could this be real? The texts were myths, stories of warriors who fought a war that ended in destruction, their race vanishing into history. But now, standing before the statue, Captain Walker couldn't deny the sense of urgency he felt. This was no ordinary relic. This was something alive, something powerful. And in that moment, he made a decision. He would not let it stay buried. He gave the order to break open the ice around the statue. The sound of metal against ice echoed through the chamber, and with each strike, the temperature seemed to drop further. The soldiers worked quickly, their breaths visible in the freezing air as they chipped away at the frozen tomb. And then, with one final blow, the ice shattered. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. The woman's body, once encased in ice, began to stir. Her eyes, glowing a fierce amber, snapped open, and she let out a roar that shook the very ground beneath them. Her fiery orange hair glowed like the sun itself, a stark contrast to the cold blue of the chamber. The soldiers froze in place, unsure whether to fight or flee. The warrior woman slowly rose, her strength evident in every movement. She looked around, confused at first, as if trying to understand where she was. But then, her eyes locked onto Captain Walker. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, to everyone's shock, the woman spoke, her voice filled with an otherworldly power. You are the one who has awoken me," she said, her voice both calm and commanding. "I am Rena, the last of my kind, and now you are my chosen." The room fell into complete silence. The soldiers couldn't believe what they were hearing. But there was no time to process it. The ground beneath them trembled, and the ice around them began to crack. Something was coming. Rena, still disoriented but powerful, stood tall. She looked at Captain Walker once more. "Prepare yourself," she said. "The war is not over. It has only just begun." The tension in the air was thick. What had they awoken? What did this warrior want? And most importantly, why did she call him her chosen? Captain Walker had no answers, only a feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The war that had been buried in the past was now returning, and this woman, this warrior, was at the heart of it. They had no idea what lay ahead, but they would soon find out. and none of them could ever go back to the world they once knew. Asterisk. The world outside the frozen temple had no idea what was unfolding deep within the mountains. News of the discovery would spread in time, but for now, it was just a few soldiers. In an ancient tomb, standing at the edge of a conflict that could shape the future of mankind, Captain Walker stood still, his mind racing. Rena, the Vulpine warrior matriarch, was the last of her kind. The myths had been true. The ancient warriors of legend hadn't been a fantasy at all. They were real, and she was the key to something far greater than anyone could have ever imagined. But what did she mean by, "I'm your chosen"? And why had she awoken now, after all these centuries? Rena's amber eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering. She was both beautiful and terrifying, her fiery orange hair still crackling with energy. She took a step forward, her movements slow but powerful, as if every step was calculated, and she knew exactly what she was doing. "Your world is fragile," she said, her voice cutting through the thick silence. "I have been asleep for ages, but now the time has come. I will protect you, as I was born to do, but I need your help." The soldiers around them exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. The woman who stood before them was an embodiment of ancient power, but they had no idea how to handle such a force. Captain Walker, however, had the distinct feeling that they didn't have a choice. "Help?" Walker asked, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "What do you mean?" Rena's eyes softened for a brief moment, almost as if she were trying to explain something that had no simple answer. "The war you know is only a fraction of the true conflict. My kind fought a battle against enemies who were unlike anything you've faced. But we were betrayed, and now our enemies are waking again. They will not rest until they wipe out everything we hold dear. I need you to help me stop them." Walker didn't know what to say. The weight of the situation pressed on him. This wasn't just about some ancient race fighting for survival. It was about the survival of his world. The world he knew. The world everyone took for granted. "Why me?" Captain Walker asked, his voice a little more strained now. Rena took another step toward him, and the air around them seemed to crackle with power. "Because you are my chosen. I have seen the future. You are a part of it." Before he could process her words, a loud noise from outside the temple interrupted the moment. The ground shook again, more violently this time. Ice and snow fell from the ceiling, and the soldiers scrambled for cover. They had barely made it out of the tomb when the first attack came. A sharp, piercing screech filled the air, and from the snow-covered cliffs above, a massive, shadowy figure descended. The creature was unlike anything the soldiers had ever seen. Its body was sleek, insect-like, and it had wings that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Its eyes were glowing red, and it was coming straight for them. Rena was ready in an instant. She grabbed a sword from the ground near her, its steel glowing in the light of the icy cavern. With one swift motion, she hurled herself into the air, her body moving with an inhuman grace and speed. She landed with a thundering crash, her sword cutting through the air as she attacked the creature without hesitation. The soldiers stood frozen in shock. The creature was attacking with a ferocity they couldn't comprehend, but Rena moved faster. Her sword sliced through its wings, and it shrieked in pain, falling to the ground with a loud thud. "You must fight," Rena shouted to the soldiers, her voice like a command. "Take your weapons and fight, or we will be overrun." The soldiers scrambled to arm themselves, firing their weapons at the creature. It was a battle unlike any they had ever fought, with technology against a creature from a time long past. But even with all their firepower, they were no match for the raw power Rena displayed. She moved like a force of nature, each strike bringing the creature closer to its end. Finally, with one powerful blow, Rena cut through the creature's chest. It crumpled to the ground, its lifeless body disintegrating into the snow. Breathing heavily, Rena turned back to Captain Walker, her eyes fierce but filled with a strange sense of relief. "This is just the beginning," she said. "The enemies of my kind will keep coming, and we must be ready." Captain Walker nodded, his mind reeling from the events that had unfolded. A war unlike anything he could imagine was on the horizon, and now he was a part of it. He didn't understand everything Rena had said, but he knew one thing for certain: this battle wasn't about to end any time soon. The future of his world rested in the hands of this ancient warrior, and there was no turning back now. The battle with the strange, winged creature had left the soldiers shaken, but the reality of their situation soon began to settle in. As the snowflakes fell softly around them, the echoes of Rena's strength and the chilling presence of the creature she had slain still hung in the air. The soldiers, now visibly more awake to the gravity of their predicament, stared at their surroundings in disbelief. They had only just awakened a legendary warrior, and already they were caught in the middle of a war of epic proportions. Captain Walker stood a few feet away from Rena, processing everything. His hands were trembling from the battle, and the sight of the creature's body lying lifeless in the snow only reminded him of the greater conflict to come. He had heard of wars that spanned centuries, but this was different. This was an ancient war that had been lying dormant, a fire buried deep beneath the ice that now threatened to ignite again. And for reasons he still didn't fully understand. He and his soldiers had been dragged into it, Rena's amber eyes fixed on Captain Walker, and though her expression was intense, there was a strange softness there. It was as if she was waiting for him to come to a realization, as though she already knew what he was about to ask. "We need to prepare," Walker said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of concern. "This isn't just about us. If this war has been dormant for so long, what other enemies are out there? What are we really dealing with?" Rena studied him for a moment, and then her gaze shifted to the horizon, where the first hints of dawn began to break through the snowstorm. The chill in the air seemed to deepen with the silence. "You're right," she said, her voice like the wind itself, cold, yet commanding. "This is not just about you or me or the soldiers here. The war one speak of is much older than you could imagine. The enemies of my kind are not mere creatures like that one." She gestured to the disintegrating remains of the winged monster. "They are a force of nature itself. The ones who betrayed us, who shattered my people, are ancient beings who wield powers beyond your comprehension." Captain Walker swallowed hard. The look in her eyes told him that this was not a warning. This was a truth she had known for centuries. "What do we do then? How do we stop them?" Rena turned back to him, her gaze never wavering. "You must trust me. Together, we can awaken the ancient power within you, the same power that flows through me. The power of the Vulpine warriors, the power to fight back against the dark forces that seek to enslave all worlds." Her eyes glowed brighter, and she stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming. "But first you must swear. An oath that binds you to this cause, no turning back, no matter what comes." Walker was taken aback. An oath? He had no idea what Rena was asking of him, but he had already witnessed her power firsthand, and he knew that whatever this was, it was crucial. He couldn't run away now, not after seeing what was at stake. The world he knew was changing, and he had to be a part of this fight, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. Rena's voice softened, and her fierce expression softened just enough to show a trace of sincerity. "Swear this, to stand by me, to fight by my side, to protect humanity and the ancient legacy of my people. And if you fail, it is not only your life at stake, it is the future of all that exists." Walker stared into her eyes, trying to read her, but there was no time for hesitation. His duty as a soldier, his instincts, and his growing trust in Rena told him that this was something he couldn't walk away from. "I swear," he said, his voice firm. "I swear to stand with you, to fight with you, Rena nodded, as though a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "Then you are bound to this cause as I am. Together we will fight." And just like that, a pact was formed. The weight of the oath hung between them, and with it came the knowledge that there was no turning back. Rena had already laid the foundation for what needed to be done: training, preparation, and alliances with ancient forces that Walker could hardly imagine. But there was one thing he knew: Rena wasn't just another warrior. She was the key to defeating this ancient evil, and he had chosen to stand by her side. The soldiers, who had gathered behind them, watched in silence. They had been thrust into something far larger than themselves. They were no longer just soldiers following orders. They were now part of something ancient and powerful. And as the dawn light broke over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the icy landscape, they knew that the war had only just begun, but they would be ready. They had to be. Rena turned back to the group, her voice cold, yet full of resolve. "Gather your weapons, we march at once. The enemies of my kind are closer than you think, and this fight, it will be unlike anything you have ever known." As they prepared to leave the frozen temple, Captain Walker couldn't shake the feeling that the world was about to change forever. The ancient war was upon them, and no one was prepared for what was coming. But as long as he stood by Rena, he knew they had a chance. Together, they could stop the darkness. Or they could fall with it. The fate of humanity rested in their hands. The storm had worsened by the time they left the safety of the temple's icy walls. The cold air bit at their faces, and the wind howled through the mountains, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. But Rena moved with purpose, her figure cutting through the snow as though the elements didn't exist for her. She was a force of nature, her fiery orange hair blazing like a beacon against the white chaos around them. Captain Walker and his soldiers followed closely behind, their breath visible in the frigid air. Though they were accustomed to harsh environments, nothing had prepared them for this, an ancient warrior leading them into a war that was older than time itself. They didn't know what exactly they were marching into, but they had made their choice. They had sworn an oath to fight alongside her, and now there was no turning back. Rena turned her head back, her eyes scanning the horizon. The amber glow of her eyes seemed to cut through the storm, as if she could see through the blizzard itself. "Stay close," she ordered, her voice calm but filled with an authority that none of the soldiers dared to question. "This is just the beginning." Walker could feel the weight of her words settle into his chest. Despite the urgency in her voice, there was something else, something deeper in her eyes. She wasn't just preparing for battle. She was preparing them. She was preparing him for something far more dangerous than any enemy they had faced before. Hours, they trudged through the snow, the only sound the crunch of their footsteps and the howling wind. It felt as though the entire world had gone silent, leaving only the group and the ancient warrior leading them toward their uncertain future. The soldiers grew weary, their bodies aching from the relentless cold, and their minds filled with doubt. Was this really their fight? What did they have to offer against such ancient power? But Rena didn't stop. She was tireless, her movements fluid and sure. She seemed to be in a world of her own, as if she was being pulled by some invisible force. Every once in a while, she would stop, her gaze fixed on the distance, as if she was searching for something. Captain Walker noticed it then. There was something more to her than just the warrior she appeared to be. Something ancient and almost otherworldly. She wasn't just leading them through the storm. She was tracking something that wasn't yet visible to anyone else. Finally, after what felt like an eternity in the storm, Rena halted. In her tracks, her eyes narrowed as she scanned the frozen wasteland before them. The soldiers, too, came to a stop, confused and on edge. "What is it?" Walker asked, his voice low, wary of disturbing whatever it was that had caught her attention. Rena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her hand raised as if to command silence. The others followed her lead, their eyes searching the vast white expanse. Then, they saw it movement. Faint at first, but unmistakable. A group of figures appeared in the distance, silhouetted against the blizzard. At first, they seemed like nothing more than shadows, but as they drew closer, the soldiers could see that these were no ordinary people. Their bodies were tall, slender, and their skin had a sickly pale glow to it. Their eyes gleamed red, like embers in the night, and their movement was unnaturally fluid, as though they were gliding rather than walking. Rena's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing as the figures drew nearer. "The enemy," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "The ones who destroyed my people." Captain Walker's heart raced as he recognized the figures for what they were. Not human, not even close. They were something else entirely. Something ancient and evil. He had no idea what they were, but he knew this was just the beginning of something much darker. "Get ready," Rena barked to the soldiers. "These are the ones who betrayed my kind. These are the ones you must fight." The soldiers quickly fell into formation, weapons ready, though the fear in their eyes was undeniable. They had faced enemies before, but nothing like this. These creatures, these beings felt wrong, as though they were made from the very fabric of darkness itself. And Rena? She was the only one who seemed to understand the true danger they posed. As the enemy approached, the air grew colder still, and the blizzard intensified, as if the world itself was turning against them. Rena's eyes blazed with fury, her posture ready for combat. "Fight with me," she ordered, her voice like a command. From the gods themselves, the first of the creatures lunged forward with incredible speed, its claws slashing through the air. Rena met it head-on, her sword flashing with a deadly grace. Her movements were a blur as she danced with the enemy. Every strike precise, every blow powerful. But there were more of them, far more than anyone could have anticipated. Captain Walker fired his weapon at the nearest creature, his hand steady despite the fear clawing at him. His shot found its mark, but it barely slowed the creature. It let out a screech and kept coming, faster than before. The soldiers fought valiantly, but it quickly became clear that they were outmatched. Rena, however, was a different story. With every swing of her sword, more of the creatures fell, disintegrating into ash as they hit the ground. She was a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding, her fury matched only by her skill. But even she was beginning to feel the weight of the battle. "Hold your ground," Rena shouted as one of the creatures lunged toward Captain Walker. Without a moment's hesitation, she launched herself into the air, her sword cutting through the creature's chest with ease. The creature crumpled to the ground, and the rest of the soldiers quickly took advantage, pushing forward with all their strength. But there were still more coming. Rena's voice echoed across the battlefield. "This is just the beginning. The war is far from over, but we will win. We must." Captain Walker glanced at her, his heart pounding. The storm around them raged on, but within this chaos, one thing was certain: they were in this together. And with Rena by his side, they would fight until the very end. But as the battle raged on, Walker couldn't shake the feeling that the true darkness was yet to reveal itself. This war was far from what they had prepared for, and the true horrors of the ancient enemy were still hidden in the shadows. The storm was only getting stronger. And so was the war. The battle had raged on for what felt like hours, but in the frozen wasteland, time seemed to lose all meaning. The storm intensified, the howling winds drowning out everything but the screeches and roars of the creatures. Despite their valiant efforts, the soldiers were tiring. Their weapons were beginning to show signs of wear, and the onslaught of these otherworldly enemies didn't seem to end. It was as if the storm itself was summoned by the creatures, an unholy symphony of nature and darkness. Captain Walker fought alongside them, his breath sharp and ragged in the cold. His hands were numb from the chill, and his body ached from The relentless combat, but there was no time to stop. Not when Rena was so fiercely battling beside him, her every move a testament to her unmatched strength and skill. She was a beacon of power in the center of the storm, cutting through the dark beings with ruthless precision, but even she was showing signs of strain. Though she never faltered, there were moments when her strikes weren't as quick, her movements not as fluid. It was clear this was taking a toll on her. Rena had lived through centuries of strife, but these enemies were relentless and perhaps more dangerous than even she had anticipated. Walker's eyes caught hers for a fleeting moment. She was surrounded by the creatures, but her gaze locked onto his, a silent command that seemed to pierce through the storm. Fall back. She shouted, her voice carrying over the tumult of the battle. We must regroup. Now, the soldiers hesitated for a moment, unsure, but Rena's authority was undeniable. They immediately began to fall back, forming a tight defensive circle around her. The creatures snarled in frustration, but they did not pursue. Instead, they seemed to retreat into the shadows of the storm, as though they were waiting, watching, planning. As the soldiers took shelter behind a large rock formation, the storm seemed to settle, if only for a brief moment. The wind howled, but the immediate danger had passed for now. Captain Walker stood next to Rena, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He glanced at her, his face lined with exhaustion. What the hell are those things? And why aren't they just attacking us directly? Rena's eyes narrowed, her face hard as stone. They're not here just to fight, she said quietly. They are scouting, testing us. And they're led by something much darker than you can imagine. She turned toward the soldiers who were catching their breath. Their eyes were wide with fear, the reality of their situation sinking in. You've seen only a fraction of their power. The true enemy is not like those creatures. They are but servants, shadows of something far more ancient. And they will stop at nothing to finish what they started. Walker's stomach churned. He had fought in wars, seen death up close, but he had never encountered anything like this. Whatever Rena was talking about, it was far beyond anything he could comprehend. Then, what do we do now? He asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Rena's gaze was distant, as though she were looking far beyond the snow-covered hills and into the very heart of darkness itself. We don't have much time. Their master is awakening. The real war is about to begin. She turned back to him, her expression resolute. We must find the heart of the dark. It's an ancient artifact, the source of their power. If we don't destroy it, the world, your world, will fall. Walker's mind raced. An artifact? A source of power? It all sounded so unbelievable. Like a story from a child's book. But then he remembered the power Rena had displayed, and the fury with which she fought. She wasn't lying. And if what she said was true, then humanity had no idea what it was about to face. Rena continued, The heart of the dark is hidden in a place only a few of my kind know about. A place far from here, deep beneath the earth, in a city that was lost long before your people walked the earth. Walker felt a chill run down his spine. How do we find it? I will guide you, Rena replied simply. But we must move quickly. The longer we wait, the stronger their master becomes. Soon, there will be no stopping him. We need to find the heart and destroy it before it's too late. Captain Walker nodded, though doubt still clung to him. The storm, the battle, the creatures, they were all part of something much larger. He had no idea how they would find this artifact or what dangers lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back down now. The future of humanity was at stake. He turned to the soldiers, rallying them for what would come next. We move out now. Follow Rena's lead. The group, though exhausted, nodded and readied their gear. The sense of urgency was palpable. There was no more room for hesitation. The war had already begun, and they were at the center of it. But despite the fear and uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope. Rena, The ancient warrior was with them. And with her strength, perhaps they had a chance. Rena took the lead once more, her figure cutting through the storm like a force of nature. Walker followed closely, his mind still swirling with the enormity of what they were about to face. The heart of the dark, this mysterious artifact that was the key to stopping the ancient enemy. But as they moved forward into the unknown, Walker couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was still to come. They were walking into the heart of darkness itself, and there was no telling if they would return. The journey to the heart of the dark had been perilous. Rena led them through treacherous terrain, the ice and snow giving way to jagged cliffs and deep chasms. Every step felt heavier, every breath colder. But the soldiers pushed forward, fueled by the knowledge that the fate of their world rested on what they were about to do. They had no choice but to follow Rena into the unknown, even as the weight of the task threatened to crush them. Captain Walker couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The deeper they ventured, the stronger the sense of danger became. There was an oppressive aura in the air, as though the very ground beneath their feet was watching them. Every crack of ice, every gust of wind felt like a warning. Stay alert, Rena ordered, her voice unwavering as she surveyed the path ahead. The heart of the dark is close, but so are they. Walker glanced at her, his brow furrowed. Who are they, exactly? Rena's amber eyes locked onto his, her expression hard. The ones who betrayed my people. The ones who will destroy yours. They are ancient, dark entities. And now their master is fully awake. As they descended into a deep valley, the temperature dropped even further. The air was thin, and the weight of the storm seemed to increase. It was as if the very atmosphere itself was thick with malevolent energy. The group pressed forward, the sense of dread growing stronger with every passing moment. Then, just as Rena had predicted, they came upon a hidden entrance, a narrow fissure in the side of a mountain, half hidden by the snow. It looked like nothing more than a crack in the rock, but Rena seemed to know exactly where they were. "This is it," she said, her voice low and filled with urgency. "The path to the heart of the dark." The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, but said nothing. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They followed Rena into the darkness, their torches flickering against the oppressive blackness of the cave. The walls were slick with moisture, and the air was damp, heavy with the smell of ancient earth and decay. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper and deeper into the mountain. It wasn't long before they reached a massive chamber, far larger than any cavern they had seen before. In the center of the room stood a massive stone altar, covered in strange runes and symbols that pulsed with a faint, eerie light. Atop the altar lay a dark crystal, the size of a man's chest, black as coal and radiating a sense of power so overwhelming that it made Walker's skin crawl. "The heart of the dark," Rena whispered, her voice filled with both awe and disgust. Before they could approach, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, sending a wave of dread through the soldiers. "You dare to enter my domain?" the voice boomed. "Fools, you cannot stop what has already begun." The ground trembled, as if something massive was stirring beneath them. From the shadows, dark figures began to emerge, their forms cloaked in black robes, their eyes glowing a sickly red. The creatures, the true enemies, had found them. Rena stepped forward, her sword in hand, her eyes blazing with fury. "You will not succeed," she declared. "This ends now." The dark figures laughed, their voices hollow and mocking. "You have no power here, warrior. The heart of the dark is ours, and with it, the power to consume all worlds. You cannot stop." U.S. Rena's eyes burned brighter, her body radiating an intense heat that seemed to make the very air shimmer. She lifted her sword high, her voice rising in a battle cry that echoed throughout the chamber. The battle that followed was nothing short of legendary. Rena moved with the speed and grace of a storm, her sword cutting through the air with deadly precision. Each strike she made shattered the dark figures, their bodies disintegrating into ash and smoke. But for every one that fell, another seemed to rise in its place. The forces of darkness were endless. Walker and the soldiers fought alongside her, their weapons clashing against the dark figures, but they knew they were outmatched. The creatures they faced were not of this world. They were ancient, born from a time before even Rena's people had fallen. Their power was overwhelming. Rena's strength, though immense, began to wane. She was being pushed back by the sheer number of enemies, her movements slowing as the energy required to fight them drained her. Walker could see the toll it was taking on her. She was a warrior of legend, but even legends had their limits. "Rena!" Walker shouted, pushing forward to stand by her side. "We need to destroy the heart. It's the only way to stop them." Rena's amber eyes flashed toward the altar, her face grim. "You're right," she said, her voice strained. "But I cannot do it alone. You must help me." Without hesitation, Walker nodded. He understood now. The heart of the dark was the source of their enemy's power, and they had to destroy it if they were to have any chance of survival. Rena rushed toward the altar, her sword slashing through the air. But as she reached for the heart, the ground shook violently. A massive, shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form so large that it filled the entire chamber. Its eyes burned with the same sickly red glow as the others, but its presence was far more terrifying. It was the Master, the source of the darkness. "You are too late," the Master growled, its voice a deep, guttural rumble. "The heart is already mine. You cannot defeat me." Rena gritted her teeth. "I will not let you win." With one final desperate surge of strength, she lunged at the heart, her sword raised high. At the same moment, Walker grabbed the nearest weapon, a jagged ancient dagger that seemed to hum with energy. Together, they struck. Rena's sword plunged into the heart, and Walker drove the dagger into the crystal center. A blinding light erupted from the heart, and the chamber shook with an explosion of raw energy. The Master screamed in fury as its form began to disintegrate, the dark figures vanishing with it. The ground cracked and split, the very mountain shaking as the power of the heart was destroyed. When the light finally faded, the chamber was silent. The soldiers stood in stunned silence, the weight of what they had just done sinking in. Rena collapsed to her knees, her energy spent. "It is over," she whispered, her voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "We have won... But at great cost." Captain Walker stood beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. They had done it. The war was over. But the cost had been too high. And yet, as he looked at Rena, the woman who had led them through this unimaginable battle, he knew one thing. They had saved humanity from the darkness. And though the war was over, the world would never be the same again.